Metal once again knocking it out of the park this year. Every time a new metal act kind of makes its way onto the scene, I always wonder how they're going to up it. I always wonder how they're going to bring something new or make me love the genre more. And, well, here's the next entry. Let's dive in. Air Not Meant for Us by Fires in the Distance. So Fires in the Distance is a US melodic death metal band, and this is their their sophomore album. They were founded in 2016, put out their first album of Echoes in Deep November way back in 2020, and I really need to get my arse in gear and listen to that one because if it's anything like this one, I'm definitely in for a treat. So yeah, we come to Air Not Meant for Us, and the thing that really stood out for me within this particular album is the use of contrasts in the melodic versus the really hard metal. And a lot of bands, especially within like the black metal movement, within the melodic metal movement, are very, very good at balancing the harsh and the soft. And I'm thinking of bands like Death Heaven, I'm thinking of DHG, I'm thinking of Dune, I'm thinking of like a lot of those kind of like post-punk, post-hardcore metal bands in that kind of a sense. But Fires in the Distance is doing something very, very interesting in that it's not leaning too hard on the post-rock aspect. They're not leaning too hard in this dark synthwave. They're leaning very much in this more symphonic soundscapes. The band is being made up of Craig Britzpreacher, I believe, on vocals and bass, Jordan Rippey, I believe, on drums, Igor Savernian on guitars and synth, and Kirsten Grimaldi on guitars and vocals. So, you've got the two vocalists coming on here, two guitarists, synth, bass, and drums, and Igor on the synth. Holy jeez, I really want to applaud and really take a moment to appreciate his playing styles because his synth can be felt throughout the entire album, not just in terms of setting mood. Because I feel like a lot of death metal pianists and keyboardists really are just there to set a mood, not even generally to harmonize or to provide some kind of like a backing rhythm. They're basically there as tone setters. And what Igor is able to do is come forth and provide the driving focus of the music more times than not. He is the one that's leading through with a beautiful piano licks. A lot of the big solo aspects on here are piano driven rather than guitar driven. And I'm loving that heavenly soundscapes that Igor is able to really put down onto the synth work in that sense. Some of my favorite moments are when, the guitars are chugging away, they're doing their death metal thing, and Igor is on there just almost like a ship on the sea and just skipping over the waves. It's so heavenly, it's so beautiful, and it is a contrast to those blast beats, those blast moments that we have on here. And Igor, I already talked about within the guitars. I also want to talk about Kirsten Grimaldi on the other guitars and on vocals. The two on the guitars do a fantastic work. Even though a lot of the main focus within the solo works do happen to be the keyboards, there's still a number of brilliant and beautiful guitar licks and guitar solos on here as well. The second last song of Psalm of the Merciless has this brilliant and beautiful guitar solo that soars the soundscapes, and it's not melting your face with 1,000 notes a second. They're kind of taking a page off the more melodic, the more psychedelic side of rock, like I'm thinking of like a Pink Floyd or a Van de Graaff Generator when they were doing more guitar licks, and providing that type of a soundscape like a David Gilmour or a Peter Hamill kind of a lick on the guitars. It's really crafting the notes exactly where they need to be, which again contrasts that big blast beats, very heavy chugging guitars that kind of surround it. So this band is a masterclass of knowing how to create contrasts. They know how to create this juxtaposition between tone, mood, and expression. And that is found throughout the entire album, and it lays its heart out on the first track of Harbingers. This track opens the album beautifully, and it really promises a lot within the actual music. It has those guitar licks that I love, and again, you got that chugging aspect of it. You've got that driven bass line that's, you know, kind of permeating throughout it, and the drumming that's provided by Jordan, you know, is really the heartbeat of this. It's blast beats when it needs to be. It's intense. It's relentless, but he also knows when to take a step back and allow the music to kind of be its own thing. You know, he doesn't feel like he needs to be on the kit all the time. He knows when to set up a simple style to allow a song to permeate, and you feel that very much so in Harbinger's The First Track. The second track of Wisdom of the Falling Leaves continues this aspect by having this more atmospheric aspect to it, this more gentle repose at points, but you still have that blaring blast beats on there, that intensity within the metal styles on it. And this comes to a head with Crumbling Pillars of a Tranquil Mind. I mean, just the track alone, the title of the track itself really does paint a picture of what to expect. You know, you've got that crumbling pillars, you know, everything's fallen apart, everything's in shambles, everything's in ruin, but of a tranquil mind along this kind of melodic, very hypnotic aspect of it. What I also really appreciate is the band is able to take their time and allow space for things to happen. My favorite track, Adrift Beneath the Listless Waves, which happens to be the shortest track, which is just over 6 minutes, really is the crowning centerpiece of this album. You know, it's right in the center of the album itself. It provides just this little bit of a respite as everything is intense, and it's a purely instrumental track, and it itself goes through a lot of different movements, a lot of different aspects, but it's really centered on this very melodic, very hypnotic note sequence that allows you to very much drift away, you know? The final two tracks, I've already talked about Psalms of the Merciless, great track. The final track, Idiopathic Despair, does a great job of closing everything off. The final track has this beautiful crescendo, this beautiful kind of ending of the curtain itself, and it provides such a nice warm hug at the end of this intense, brutal, just non-stop moments, you know? The fact that they leave themselves so much space to play in, they really do fill up the room. You know, it feels like they're in this massive cathedral at points, and they're just kind of stretching their legs and seeing where the echoes of their music are really creating the atmosphere and the architecture of the tracks and the albums themselves. I mean, this looks like a Rembrandt painting. You know, the actual cover itself very much resembles all of that like pre-Raphaelite artistry, and that's one of my favorite movements within art. And the music goes very, very well with this kind of essence within the music, you know, that very lush oil painting. There's a lot of contrasts on it. There's a lot of details on it, but it's not insanity the entire time. Yes, the subject might be in peril, it might be in pain, it might be in scorn, it might be in fear, but the actual imagery itself is quite beautiful. And it's that mastery of the contrasts. It's that mastery of when to have the blast beats, when to hold off and allow that very symphonic, big essence of the metal take forth. So this one was an absolute delight. And I found myself coming back to it time and time again. Yes, there are harsh vocals. Yes, there's going to be growls and screaming. And I love a good blech. You know, there's a couple good blech going on this album, and I love it. So do know that going in. But if you're kind of like a new individual that's trying to kind of get their feet wet, kind of get the taste of this more harsh metal, I think this is a very easy entry point. You know, there's not going to be a lot of demand on this in terms of buy-in. You know, you're not going to have to sit through a heck of a lot of music on here, because it is, you know, not even 50 minutes worth of music, but there's a lot of progression on here. I think you guys are going to be really surprised with that. My final rating for this album shouldn't be too much of a surprise. Air Not Meant for Us by Fires in the Distance is one I absolutely love with my whole heart. The only real criticism that I have about this album isn't even with this album itself, but it's something that I've noticed within the genre of black metal and melodic metal. It's the mixing needs a little bit of work. You know, the mastering feels a little bit muddled. It feels a little bit... I wish there was a little bit more dynamic in the mixing, and that's only within the production side of things. In terms of the music, in terms of the artistry, in terms of everything that's on the page, it's flawless. It's practically perfect. It's just that little bit of production side that just needs a little bit of an extra polish that would really elevate this one for me, you know, because I love listening to this on a really good pair of headphones, and I feel like there's not a whole lot of dynamic on there, even though there's a number of songs that use the two channels very, very well, and I really like that, but it just feels like all the instruments at times are flattened to be very, very compressed. And I for a album that's begging to be listened to in a big airy space, I didn't feel the mix kind of had that. But that's my only real criticism, and the only reason why I'm not really giving it a masterpiece. I'm also afraid this might be a flash in the pan kind of thing, because you know me, I gush over an album, I friggin' love an album, and then I play it to death and then I never pick it up again. And I'm really hoping that doesn't happen for this. I hope that this really does appreciate and really does like age very, very well as the year goes on. So we'll see. This one is a very strong contender for my favorite album of the year so far. It's sitting on a pretty high pedestal at the moment, and we'll see how this shapes up. This is an absolute recommendation for me. I think anybody can get something out of this one. This is a run, don't walk, no seal of approval. Go and check it out. Yeah, absolutely a blast. And that's it for me for Air Not Meant for Us by Fires in the Distance. What did you guys think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And that's all I've got for you guys today. That's all I've got. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.